Hey guys, are you ready to transform your mind so you can transform your life? Coach Myrna brings you one-on-one coaching and expert guests weekly to help you to grow. Because happiness is the progressive realization of a worthy goal.
Looking for personal growth? Let's do it. Are you a last-minute shopper like me? You know, the anxious feeling that the shelves will be empty and eye days are running low? Aura Frames is the solution with a gift that feels personal. Share photos and videos effortlessly, straight from your phone all year long. Every frame comes packaged in a premium gift box with no price tag because the best gifts don't sit on shelves, they sit in the heart. For a limited time, save on the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off of Aura's best-selling Carver matte frames. Named number one by Wirecutter. By using promo code TRANSFORM at checkout. That's AURA frames.com. Promo code TRANSFORM. This deal is exclusive to listeners and frames sell out fast. So order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. You know you want to start a business. What you may not know is how to make it a reality. GoDaddy Arrow's got you. It uses AI to help you find the domain name that's right for you. Next, answer a few prompts, and with a couple of clicks, Arrow will design a professional-looking website and storefront in minutes. Arrow can even help you stay engaged with your customers. Just attach a professional email that matches your domain. With GoDaddy Arrow, you can build a business without having to know a thing about this stuff. Just visit GoDaddy.com to get started. That's GoDaddy.com. Premium features required paid subscription. See terms on site. What someone did to you when you were a child, concentrate on the present and not even the future, but concentrate on the now. Do you ever take that approach?
No, I absolutely do. So the thing is about Mental Health Rewritten is that it's a nonfiction narrative show, which means that we use storytelling throughout the conversation. So we have like people we interview, people who have first world experience, but also those behavioral health clinicians who break down their experience and this that, and the other. But also in between those conversations are a fictional representation of that topic for that day that I actually write. Right. So, for instance, for like a trauma or something like that, or something that we're currently in the current track that we're in, we're talking about suicide. So, we have a story, a fictional story where we have somebody who talks about suicidal ideation and what those inner thoughts are going on in their head. So, it really is rewriting that story and rewriting that narrative as well. And one of the things about
Welcome back to the Transform Your Mind to Transform Your Life, the podcast. Today's guest is Dominic Lawson. He is an award-winning producer in the mental health space, and I wanted to share him with you today. And Dominic and I are going to be talking on the topic transforming shame, combating mental health with empathy. Welcome, Dominic.
Thank you so much for having me, Myrna. I really appreciate you having me here.
You're very welcome. You're very welcome. Love that radio voice too. Awesome. All right. Well, let me give you guys a brief introduction. Dominic Lawson is a 24-time award-winning podcast host, producer, and editor based in Memphis, Tennessee. In 2021, Lawson joined Meadows Behavioral Healthcare as a podcast producer, editor, and host. He took the helm of the Beyond Theory podcast, facilitating in-depth conversation with experts in mental health and addiction recovery. His innovative approach led to the launch of Recovery Replay in April 2022, a groundbreaking podcast that chronicles personal recovery stories from 3 distinct perspectives. Demonstrating his versatility, Lawson introduced Black is America podcast on February 1st, 2022, shedding light on lesser-known African American figures and narratives. He launched Mental Health Rewritten in May of this year. So, yes, which is why I wanted to talk to Dominic and, shed light again on, mental health in our community in transforming the shame of it, because a
Yeah.
lot of times we have shame behind it. Our white brothers and sisters, they all tell us, "Oh, I've been in therapy." But, our community doesn't want to say that, even if they are. There's some kind of shame behind it. So, as we start off, Dominic, what is the main message behind Mental Health Rewritten, which is one of your podcasts?
Yeah. So again, Myrna, thank you so much for having me in that beautiful introduction. I really appreciate that. So the idea of mental health rewritten is to really refocus and rewrite the conversation around mental health. Mental health as a social construct, I guess, is becoming more and more acceptable now, right? We're able to talk about shame, we're able to talk about trauma, we're able to talk about many different things, and that's a good thing. However, with that, we are also in a era of social media and virality and trending topics and clicks and baits and downloads and stuff like that. So oftentimes people use mental health, unfortunately, even though they're not trying to, I don't think, sometimes the message can get lost, right? Because trauma can become trendy, right? And people will label, oh, that's a trauma, or he's a narcissist, and this and the other. So the idea with mental health rewritten is to, okay, we love the awareness about mental health, right? But let's rein it back in a little bit and focus on what these terms and concepts actually mean, right? So one of the things we do with mental health rewritten is partner with behavioral health clinicians, right? And so for the instance of something called trauma, right? Like we break down in the DSM-5 what exactly trauma is, right? Or a narcissist or things of that nature. So that's the premise of mental health rewritten, just to kind of have these foundational building blocks, if you will. So that way, when we do have these conversations and we do promote the awareness of mental health and behavioral health, that we have the actual tools to say, okay, this is what this is. But also at the same time to remind ourselves, many of us are not behavioral health clinicians. So we should really leave the diagnosing up to those professionals, right? But I am available. I have the privilege of having behavioral health professionals work with me on this work, and I can share that information.
Yeah, that's great. I was thinking of rewriting the story, meaning that a lot of times, um, you know, in fact, I was reading a book recently that said there's no such thing as trauma. And, I mean, it
Right.
was a good premise because, what they were going after is saying is that it's in the past and whatever. I don't even remember now, but that was
Mhm.
one of the bullets of the book. It's saying there's no such thing as trauma. So I'm thinking that if I were to have a headline of mental health rewritten, maybe I would be saying having those same conversations, don't be stuck on what someone did to you when you were a child. Concentrate on the present and not even the future, but concentrate on the now. Do you ever take that approach?
No, I absolutely do. So the thing is about mental health rewritten is that it's a nonfiction narrative show, which means that we use storytelling throughout the conversation. So we have like people we interview, people who have first world experience, but also those behavioral health clinicians who break down their experience and this that, and the other. But also in between those conversations are a fictional representation of that topic for that day that I actually write, right? So, for instance, for like a trauma or something like that, or something that we're currently in the current track that we're in, we're talking about suicide. So we talk about, so we have a story, a fictional story where we have somebody who talks about suicidal ideation and what those inner thoughts are going on in their head. So it really is rewriting that story and rewriting that narrative as well. And one of the things about, when you talked about that example of traumas in the past is doesn't exist, this and the other. What
Do
I
you
would
agree with that?
I don't agree with that. And the reason being is because one of the people I had the privilege of working with is Dr. Bessel van der Kolk, who is a renowned expert when it comes to trauma, and he wrote this phenomenal book that many people have written. I think it's been translated in like 52 languages now, called "The Body Keeps the Score." So, like, even if that trauma has happened, 10, 15, 20 years from now, right? The body remembers what happens to it, right? And sometimes those things often come up later on. I believe there was a study that said of seven of the top 10 uh, things that lead to death in this country, like, chronic pain and this and the other, comes from childhood trauma, right? And so it's that constant fight or flight freeze that you may find yourself in as a kid and this and the other. So no, I don't believe that. I do believe trauma is a very real
I
thing.
gotta revisit that. So next time I bring it up, I'll have the story. But I think I understood what the author was trying to say is that we keep reliving it, and
Right.
that's what makes it, real. But you're very right. We hold trauma in our, one of my most catchphrases of one of my guests is he said, the issues are in your tissues. So yeah, we do hold it in our bodies, and your body does not forget. And you're right. It translates into chronic pain. It translates into even what we're talking about, mental
Right.
health.
Right.
And it's, in our relationships, it intercepts a lot of our things.
Correct.
But again, there's always two sides to a story. One of it is the fact that, yeah, in order for trauma to keep going, we got to keep reliving it.
Right.
Right. So, and I don't remember what's the reason that the book said, but I agree with you. And I know that, that if you one of the things as a coach that I say is that if you think of something differently, then it would start to change. So if
Right.
you think that this person did you something when you were a child, and like, somebody has trauma by that someone says that they're not going to amount to anything, and they, and if you change that and says I am going to amount to something, you know what I mean, and you take it in your position to dispute what that person says, then you change the trajectory of your life. But if you keep replaying, I'm not going to amount to nothing. So there's two sides to it, and I agree with you.
No, for sure, and I'm glad, even though I may disagree with it, I'm pretty sure there's some nuance to it, right? Like you
Right,
explained it, right? No,
exactly.
I appreciate that part of the conversation being had, because I think it's one of those things where we need to keep, having these conversations and talking about it to kind of see, those different perspectives. Because what may be trauma for somebody else may not be trauma for another person. So it's one of those things where it's super important to have those conversations.
Yeah, right,
So,
right, yeah. Yeah, I agree. So your tag, your podcast, Mental Health Rewritten, I'm pretty sure and I like the fact that you said you write some of the scripts. So if I
yes.
were to do something like that, that's what I would do. I would focus on writing those stories, right? Right.
And so all of my podcast work is nonfiction narrative. So everything is written out. Right? It's all written out. So yeah. So I am very deliberate and intentional about, like, the type of stories I want to tell, but also the message I want to get across.
Yeah, yeah, that's good work. That's important work. Great. Yes, and start changing those, beliefs and internal systems and internal dialogues by,
Absolutely.
writing a new story. I love it. I love it. I love it. Are you a last minute shopper like me? You know, the anxious feeling that the shelves will be empty and ideas are running low? Aura Frames is the solution with a gift that feels personal. Have you ever done the frantic Christmas Eve shopping run? I'm here to save you. Gift your loved ones an Aura Frame. You can preload photos before it ships so your gift is ready the moment it's turned on. Keep adding photos from anywhere, anytime. Just download the Aura app and connect to Wi Fi. Share photos and videos effortlessly, straight from your phone all year long. Every frame comes packaged in a premium gift box with no price tag because the best gifts don't sit on shelves, they sit in the hearts. For a limited time, save them the perfect gift by visiting auraframes.com to get $35 off of Aura's best-selling Carver matte frame, named #1 by Wirecutter, by using promo code TRANSFORM at checkout. That's AURA frames.com, promo code TRANSFORM. This deal is exclusive to listeners, and frames sell out fast. So order yours now to get it in time for the holidays. Support the show by mentioning us at checkout. Terms and conditions apply. You know you want to start a business. What you may not know is how to make it a reality. GoDaddy Arrow's got you. It uses AI to help you find the domain name that's right for you. Next, answer a few prompts, and with a couple of clicks, Arrow will design a professional-looking website and storefront in minutes. Arrow can even help you stay engaged with your customers. Just attach a professional email that matches your domain. With GoDaddy Arrow, you can build a business without having to know a thing about this stuff. Just visit GoDaddy.com to get started. That's GoDaddy.com. Premium features required, paid subscription. See terms on site. Now, one of the things that we want to talk about today is the shame around mental health, especially in the Black community. So how is your podcast handling that? I know I read out several different podcasts here. So which podcast is focusing on transforming the shame?
So one of the things that we're going to focus on later this season in Mental Health Rewritten is the idea of racial trauma, right? There's that word again, trauma, right? This idea that especially African Americans here in the United States, and how that generational trauma has been passed down, ever since post-slavery, right? And what some of those ramifications have been played out, seen, this, that, and the other. And the thing is, people like to say that, um, oh, slavery was so long ago. That was a long time ago. You weren't even living around that time. But the thing is, Myrna, is that like what people I'll just throw this out there. The last Civil War benefit recipient, like who was getting like a pension or whatever, passed away in 2020. So when you have that perspective, we're not so far removed from that time period as you may think, right? And so the thing is, that, when you have that type of trauma and those type of things get passed around, and it's not even just the enslavement piece. There's other pieces that go around, right? And then you hear, in the Black community, you have to be tough. You have to keep going. You have to, you can't be worried about the small stuff, right? But that stuff wears on you, right? That stuff wears on you. Like I said, we've been talking about trauma a lot. There's the idea of big T trauma where there's like a car wreck or an accident, stuff like that. And then there's small T trauma. It's the small things that may not be a big impact right now, but if it keeps happening over and over and over again, that stuff starts to wear on you. Anxiety starts to happen. Depression starts to happen, right? And this idea of like, oh, you got to be strong. Black folks, we don't go to therapy. We don't. No, that's not a
That's
thing.
what I said at the
Right?
beginning. Yeah.
Right.
White
That-
folks
that's
are
not a
proud
thing.
of it, and we don't go.
Right.
Right.
But the funny thing is that in doing this work, it's actually not even just exclusive to Black people. What I've often seen is that like many marginalized communities, that thinking is there, right? And so what we try to do with mental health rewritten, and when we talk about racial trauma and stuff like that, we get into the shame. First, we have to understand that you know, there's good shame and there's bad shame, right? Sometimes there's good shame in the sense of sometimes that needs to
Good
kind of
shame.
put
Okay.
put
And
put
like,
put it in their place, right? Because the thing is like there are a lot of times where people are out here spouting stuff. You ever heard of the whole phrase just loud and wrong, right?
Yeah.
You know, okay, so the idea is that
Right. Yeah.
right, exactly, right? So that idea is like, so there's nobody out there putting that person in their place, like fact checking them or this, that, and the other, right? Like that would be some good shame to have. Toxic shame would be in the sense of like, oh, you shouldn't go to, why are you going to therapy? That's a terrible thing. You're
Right,
trying
right,
to,
right.
you're doing it like that's that toxic shame. So first we try to break down both of those things, right? And then we try to get over the idea that like, listen, it is okay to seek some help to talk some things out, right? That's why we have 988 where people can go and talk to somebody that's 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, like a mental health counselor and this that, and the other, because that thing is important, right? It's a reason we have therapists who go to school and try to help people. It's a reason we have counselors and therapists, this, that, and the other.
Mhm.
But this idea of not being able to seek help is problematic. We don't do that for cancer. We don't do that for somebody who's broken an arm. It's only for stuff that we can't see. And so
Well, it's
again, just like
mental health because
exactly right.
they don't want that stigma. Right.
Exactly right. And so it's
Right.
like we don't have the stigma of like, you know, doing, somebody going to the hospital for those things. And so again, as more and more of this conversation about mental health comes to the forefront, it comes to society and stuff like that, that's part of the things we have to combat against. Right. And so that's just going to have to take some work. So we really have to combat against that shame.
Yeah, I know. And it started with the Me Too movement for women coming out and
Mhm.
talking about being sexually abused. Um,
Absolutely.
and right, and then there's some black men came out and say that they were sexually abused, and that's a whole bunch of shame around that.
Absolutely.
But they were able to come out and talk about it. And what they're doing is they're letting everybody else because they're stars, right? And people always look up to
Mhm.
stars. So the stars are role models. So they're saying that yeah, there's no shame that what somebody did to you. I had shame for years. I was sexually abused as a kid, and it took me until I was in my 40s to start talking about that. And now I've let go of that shame because it had nothing to do with me,
Right.
right? Somebody did something to me. But that's what's happening. It's either culturally or the message that we were given in our younger years or something that says that, having mental health issues is something that you've got to hide from, right?
One of the things I learned in the behavioral health space, like before I started working at Meadows Behavioral Health Care and doing this work and doing the work in behavioral health as it relates to podcasting and things of that nature, I would go into AA meetings and I would go sit down in group meetings and stuff like that because and just listen. Like, don't ask any questions, just sit down and listen. And one of the things that I learned very early on was silence keeps you sick.
Mm.
Silence keeps you sick. If you hold this stuff in and you don't have these conversations, you don't talk about it, right? And I'm not saying you have to talk about it with everybody, like, but if you don't have that conversation, a responsible conversation with a professional or even a confidant, right?
Mhm.
That silence and that shame and that stigma, it will keep you sick, not just mentally, but sometimes physically
Physically.
as
Yeah.
well, right? So that's one of the things that I always try to get over to people. Silence keeps you sick.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also want to touch on the slavery generational trauma because Um, uh, it's even though you might think that, you said something about slavery is not that far removed, it's your second generation now. Um, it will go on forever because we keep passing down. It's 50% of our DNA comes from generational trauma. So it passed it,
Mhm.
it's passed down, right? And fear feels
Absolutely.
like that is passed down. So yeah, I mean, the black community has a lot to overcome. And it's not that we're no longer slaves, but this country has a long way to go to accept us. Right? Do you know what
Right.
I mean?
And that,
Yeah.
no, absolutely. And that's why Dr. Joy DeGroy, I don't know if you're familiar with her work, she has coined the phrase of you've heard the phrase post traumatic stress syndrome,
Right.
but she has coined the phrase post traumatic slavery syndrome,
Mm.
right? And it's this
Never heard that one.
idea
Right.
is that idea that like there is so much trauma that has been passed down from
Right.
American chattel slavery that
Yes.
it's going to take, if ever,
Right.
centuries to
Centuries. Right.
figure out, right?
Yeah.
And so it is a very real thing. And like I said, like we just pointed out, we're not that far removed as we like to think we are.
No.
So, it's going to take a long time. And so that's why I've heard people say all black people, especially here in America, should go to therapy. I agree with that. I think all black people should go to therapy because, like, easy
A
as it
lot
is
of
for
people
that.
I haven't heard of. That's a good
Yeah,
one. I agree with them all.
no, I
Yeah.
just agree with that, but I mean, I just agree with that because
Yeah.
again, there's so much to be black in America, right?
Yeah.
From having ideas stolen to having the idea of guilty until proven innocence, and not the way they say it the other way around,
Right.
right?
Profiling,
And
all
so
those things.
profiling, all of those
Mhm.
things, right?
Yes.
So again, those things get passed down from generation to generation. Like my mom will tell me like, "Hey, don't do that because that may happen." Like, "Mom, but I'm in a decent enough neighborhood." Like, "No, no, 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 no.
Yeah.
Never forget that you are black in America."
Yeah.
Right. And so it's one of those things where it's like, and the thing is, like, I know my mom's not trying to be malicious. She's just trying to keep me safe. Right. But like, believe it or not, like there's this terrible, horrible stereotype about black people in swimming. Right.
Mm.
Black people don't know how to swim, this, that, and the other. Right. First of all, there's Olympic gold medalists that are black people that will swim. So do with that what you will. And also at the same time,
It's true though. But more than 50% of us don't know how to swim.
but here's the thing though.
Right.
There's a systematic reason why that may be the case.
Yeah.
You think about when Dr. King was marching for, equal rights and this, that, and the other, one of the main things, one of those main battlegrounds were places of leisure,
Mhm.
amusement parks, theme parks, swimming pools,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
And so when you have places where you can't go in the same swimming pool and there's limited swimming pools, this, that, and the other, where can you swim?
Yeah.
And then you hear stories and see videos of people pouring acid in pools or draining pools because some black person
Some black
dipped
persons.
their toe in and
Right.
stuff like that.
Right.
Again, so when you have that stigma and you're a parent around that time, what are you going to tell your kid? Oh, we're not going swimming. And that gets passed down generation to generation, generation.
We always have to understand the root causes. That's
Exactly.
amazing. And I never thought of that. Always thought that, women, of course, don't want to mess up their hair, but you're right.
Mhm.
Back, but men can't swim either. And,
Right.
I understand that story more than you think because one of the guests I had on this podcast wrote a book about Bill Gones, who was the first Black Navy SEAL. And he couldn't learn to swim in the pools because of the fact that he was Black. He wasn't able to go into pools. And you know that being a Navy SEAL is all about swimming. So that's why this guy wrote
It's
a
a big
book
part
about
of the job.
coming. You becoming the first Black Navy SEAL, and you can't go swim in the swimming pools. But yeah, so yeah, I'm aware of that. So it's
Yeah.
always good to look at the root causes. Oh my goodness, it's amazing.
It's systemic.
Look, yeah, we can look at the root causes for a lot of things that's happening in the Black community. And you're right. It could all be traced back to, first of all, you said something very important that most of our issues are traced back to childhood trauma. But then we can even go further back into generational trauma and
Correct.
slavery and things that was passed down because the grandmother passed it to mother, just like how your mother said, don't go there, and then you
Right.
pass it to your kids. It's not even what
Exactly.
we get in our DNA is the culture.
Right. A good friend of mine, he told this anecdote about his grandmother when she would, bake a ham or something in the oven, right? She would always cut the sides or whatever, to make sure the ham fit. But the reason it was, cutting the sides was because her mother told her, "Oh, well, it's not gonna fit if you don't cut the sides." And so as over time, these annual ovens got bigger and bigger. That's like you
And she still
still
cut
cut
the
the
side.
sides, and so the kid's like, "Why are you cutting the sides? Like, we got to make sure it fit." But like,
Got
it will fit. Just put it in there. So that is just a classic example
Yes.
of how that happens.
Yeah.
Classic example of how that happens.
Yeah. That's amazing. All right. So, yeah. So, did you want to share a story? A recent story of how you wrote a narrative. Um, or maybe you might want to talk about your new podcast that you have just you've got a new podcast, right? That you have just launched in February. Do you want to talk about that?
Well, mental health rewritten is the brand new one, right? And we kind
Oh,
of
okay.
talked about that. So what I will share is
Mhm.
probably the most listened to, the most downloaded episode was about suicidal ideation. It was the first episode that we talked about suicide on Mental Health Rewritten. So I created um, a fictional character, Nia Hollowell, and she is this black woman, successful to the T, great family, stellar husband, this, that, and the other. And yet still she had all of this weight on her. And in the beginning of the episode, Myrna, I said, like, listen, this episode won't end the way you hope, right? And so in the end, she does die by suicide because again, I needed to highlight this information of on the surface, it can look like perfect. It can look like the career job, the influence that people look for you for advice, the amazing husband,
Right.
the kids who both get straight A's.
We have lots of real life stories like that. Doesn't have to be
Absolutely.
right.
No, absolutely, absolutely, right, right. And it cuts across socioeconomic barriers, backgrounds, color, race, all the things, right. And so I particularly wanted to highlight Black women because I think oftentimes, and Malcolm X said this, the most disrespected person in America is the Black woman,
Yeah.
right. And so I wanted to highlight this story through the lens of a Black woman in the sense of like how often they are the most educated, the best entrepreneurs, all of these things, and yet still they feel so unseen, right, and not listened to, right. And so I told that story, and I got so many emails and messages about thank you for writing this episode, thank you for seeing us, thank you for highlighting that while Black women may have the success on the surface, that there's so much in between um, that people don't see. And honestly, I was inspired to write that episode by having a conversation with my wife. Right? Like there are times where even as her husband, I don't see certain things. And
Right.
she has like, listen, Dom, like when you said this is what made me feel like, oh, I didn't think about it. My apologies. I didn't know. And I've been married to her for over 10 years now. Like I did not know. Right. And so it was just one of those things where it's like, listen, let's sit down, let's have this conversation. Let me write this story. And it resonated with a lot of people. So that's probably the episode that really hits a lot of home. And I actually had to take a break after I wrote that episode because I had to go to a place creatively that, that really had me questioning some things and having some deep uh you know uh thinking about things and rethinking some things and stuff like that. So I really put a lot of myself into that that episode for sure. But again, it was worth it, and a lot of people resonated with it.
But yeah, and especially coming from a black man, I mean, I was I think I don't remember if I was interviewing someone or was reading a book and someone was talking about how a woman feels and it was a man. And I'm thinking like, how could you actually know that? This is what I was thinking. So, but the
Right.
fact is that you are writing that story. Obviously you're getting data from the women in your life, your mom, your wife, or whatever, but you're putting your perspective on it. And a lot of times you're right. If black women don't feel seen, a black man saying, "I see you, I feel you, I understand you, I know what you're going through," it will resonate, a whole lot better than even if a woman wrote it. So it's probably why.
No, it was definitely an important episode that I wanted to write, and I I got my wife's approval before I put it out there, had her listen to it and stuff like that. But a lot of people resonated with it for sure.
Well, that's good. Amazing. All right. So tell our listeners how they can connect with you. Your podcast, your social media handles, your website, things like
Absolutely.
that. Mhm.
Absolutely. Well, first, let me say thank you so much, Myrna, for having me on your wonderful show. I really appreciate the opportunity.
You're welcome.
You can find me for the most part on Instagram and LinkedIn. Just my first and last name on LinkedIn and on Instagram, the real Dominic Lawson. I'm usually posting podcast stuff and also just some photography stuff that I do from time to time, some aerial stuff. But also, as far as the podcast, you can find Mental Health Rewritten. You can find Black is America, and also all of my work on iTunes. I'm sorry, it's called Apple Podcasts now. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and then wherever you can find podcasts.
Okay. Okay. Amazing. All right. So, yeah, I enjoyed our conversation, Dominic.
Likewise.
It's great to highlight mental health in our community. Mental health generate the things that we have to deal with in our community. But like you're correct, it's not only happening in our community. You mentioned it's happening in marginalized communities, happening in the white community. But hey, we are
Absolutely.
the spokespeople for our community. So if you want to highlight our community and the problems that we have in our community, and our community is the only one that went through slavery and have that crap that's keeps rolling down the hill in our on our mental health, in our bodies, and in our culture and things like that. So yeah, any help that we can anything that we can do to highlight and showcase that, it's amazing, which is one of the reasons I wanted to talk to you. And yes, yeah, and you know um we're addressing the shame. There is no shame in getting help, because I love also what you said. If you don't get help, you keep being sick, right?
Silence keeps you sick.
Right. Yeah, silence make you sick, right? So when you don't talk about it, what you're doing is you're making it festering, and it's going into your tissues. Um, I think you started to say, but you didn't continue saying it, is that when you have these things in your tissues and your whatever, not only affects your mental health, it affects chronic disease. That's where chronic disease comes
Yes.
from. Right, right.
Absolutely.
So yeah, so you've got to get rid of it. You got to talk about it. You got to go to therapy, have somebody that you can talk to, a good friend, or your spouse or someone, if you don't want to go. But I know several people in my own immediate family that refuse to go to therapy. So I hear you. I hear you. So
And I'll say this one last thing, if I could, Myrna. And it's also important to understand, like, there isn't this idea of, you understand, you have a challenge, you go to therapy, and then you're cured. Like, that's not how this works.
I know.
Like, this is a constant, ongoing. I know you know, but this is just for your audience. This is a
Right.
constant, ongoing, endeavor, right? Because, like, you can have gone to therapy 10 years ago, and something will trigger you, something will come up. But it's the things you learn in trigger in therapy, the modalities, the activities, the exercises, breathing, or taking a walk, or whatever that may be. That's how you are able to live your best life, keep doing the best thing you can do, and all that. But it's a continuous thing. There is no cured when it
Sure.
comes to these things.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably one of the problems where people are not, especially in our community, are not so accepting, but, like, they just want to be cured. Like, that's not how this works.
Right,
It's not how
right,
this works.
right. Yeah, because you talk to white people and they're saying, I've been going to therapy for 10 years, even people like the Kardashians.
Right.
You know what I mean? Thinking what problems they have, right? But they're upfront about their therapy and their therapist and all that, and they're actually proud of it. So yeah, you're
I've
right.
I've actually learned that people with access, like money and stuff like that, usually have more problems because they have more access to things, right? Like, because the affluency of what they have going on allows them to be in more circles, have more opportunities, more money for stuff like that, and that actually just leads to more exposure points for problems later on. So, believe it or not, I know people like to say they have money. What kind of problems can they have? They probably have way more than we probably even have because of that very thing.
I guess so. The Kardashians are having therapy.
Right.
Right. Yeah. But yes, the point I was trying to make is that, yes, if you know that there's something that is not sitting well with you, even my daughter said yesterday, she wants to know what is the mindset where you have a problem and you don't do anything about it. And like I said, it's right in my immediate circle where people do not address situations or things for whatever reason. We don't know the mindset. So whenever we have conversations like this that highlights um uh, you know this problem, and hopefully we've reached a few people today that says, yeah, go get help, go talk to someone about it. And
Please do.
also, one of the things with talk therapy is that you feel better. And that's the most important thing, That's not saying that you're going to be cured, but you feel better because it's something that's called downloading, right? You talk to someone about it and then you feel better.
Absolutely. And the fact that like you now have these, exercises that you can now do when something comes up later on, right? So that's also important too. You get to empower yourself.
Yes, yes, tools. Awesome. All right. So, well, listen, thank you, Dominic, for being on the show. Thank you for sharing this important message. Thank you guys for tuning into this week's episode of Transform Your Mind so that you can transform your life. Today, we're talking about transforming shame, combating mental health with empathy. Thank you, Dominic, for being on the show. Thanks again. Until next time, namaste.